This podcast resource has been put together by Provider Compliance Pty Ltd. If you are looking at becoming an aged care provider, please contact Provider Compliance to discuss how we can support you in becoming registered. Please contact us on 1-800-299-452 or info@providercompliance.com.au. Also, check us out on Google Reviews as we are rated 5 stars for the work we complete.
Kide, and welcome back to the deep dive. Look, if you're involved in Australian government-funded aged care services, maybe you're already operating or perhaps you're thinking about getting into it, you'll know things are, well, changing a lot.
They really are. It's a huge shift.
We've got the Aged Care Act 2024 and all the new rules that go with it. It feels like the whole regulatory landscape has been, I don't know, completely redrawn.
That's a good way to put it. Redrawn and significantly deepened. This isn't just tinkering around the edges.
No, it feels much more fundamental. Like it's really about a shift in, well, in accountability.
It absolutely is. And you can see the intent behind it. It's designed to be really comprehensive and, importantly, preventative. The focus is squarely on the safety, the well-being, the rights of older people.
Right from the start.
Right from the very start.
Yeah.
Literally from the moment an organization even thinks about providing funded care. The challenge now for everyone, really new players and established providers, is getting your head around the sheer level of detail and scrutiny the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, the commission expects.
Yeah, the commission's role seems central to everything now, and that's exactly why we're here today. Our mission, if you like, is to try and cut through some of that complexity, especially around getting registered and what's expected day to day.
Yeah, unpack it a bit.
Exactly. So we're doing a deep dive, looking closely at 3 really key documents. There's the Commission's own provider registration policy. We're using version 3.0, the October 2025 one.
Correct.
Then there's the registration audit guide, which is crucial for certain types of providers. And finally, the big one, the strengthened aged care quality standards. Again, the August 2025 version. These are the standards everyone will be measured against.
So think of this session, this deep dive, as maybe an essential shortcut, a strategic overview.
Hopefully, yeah.
We really need to analyze what the regulator's actually asking for. So we'll cover, who they think is suitable to even apply.
Right, yeah.
How that new audit process works. Particularly for those higher risk services, that's a really critical piece.
It sounds like it.
And then what do these 7 new quality standards actually mean in practice, on the ground, day to day?
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's get into it. Maybe start right at the foundation, the commission itself, what's its role, and what legislation is backing all this up. So the commission, their mandate seems much clearer, much sharper in these new documents. It's not just about, ticking compliance boxes anymore, is it? What's their big picture purpose now?
It's very explicit. You're right. It's not just box ticking. Their stated purpose, and it's embedded right in the legislation, is all about protecting and improving the safety, the health, the well-being, and importantly, the quality of life for older Australians who are receiving government-funded care.
Okay, protect and improve.
Yeah. And the ultimate goal, as they put it, is to regulate providers to make sure they meet their obligations. Obligations to deliver safe, quality care. And this part is really emphasized, to treat people with dignity and respect.
Dignity and respect. That feels like a stronger focus than before.
I think so.
Yeah.
And they talk about striving for a world-class sector. Now, that's quite an ambition.
It is.
But it really shapes their whole approach to regulation, which, as the documents make clear, is very much about prevention, rather than just reacting after something goes wrong.
Prevention over reaction. That sounds like a pretty significant strategic shift for providers, especially new ones.
It is possibly the biggest takeaway for anyone entering the sector. Their approach is explicitly designed to be proportional to risk.
Risk to older people.
Exactly. Risk faced by older people. So the whole system aims to spot potential risks early and step in to stop harm before it happens.
Okay.
Which means, logically, the scrutiny right at the entry point, the registration process we're talking about, has to be tough. It's inherently rigorous because it's part of that preventative strategy. They want evidence of good systems, good culture, before you even start providing funded services.
So the burden really shifts. You're not just saying, we promise to comply later. You have to actually demonstrate you're ready to prevent harm from day one.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You need to show readiness. And this isn't just policy preference. It's all grounded in that new legislative framework.
The 2024 Act and the 2025 rules.
That's right. Everything the Commission does, especially these registration activities, falls under the authority of the Aged Care Act 2024 and the Aged Care Rules 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the specific powers granted to the Commissioner under the Act, particularly in Chapter 3, Parts 2 and 3, they're pretty comprehensive.
Right, I saw that. That's where they get the power to register providers, renew registrations.
But also to vary them, suspend them, or even revoke them entirely.
So they really do hold the keys to operating in the funded aged care sector.
They hold the keys, yes. And it's important to understand it's not just about regulating the organization itself. Think of it like a multi-layered defense.
How so?
Well, while this policy focuses heavily on the provider entity, the Commission also regulates individuals, specifically aged care workers, and what they call responsible persons.
So people in leadership roles, directors, executives.
Exactly. Those in governance and key management positions. If the Commission picks up concerns about an individual's suitability or their behavior, maybe through incident reports, complaints, whatever, they have tools to act against that person directly.
Like banning orders.
Like banning orders, yes. They can restrict or completely prohibit unsuitable individuals from working or governing in the sector. So they're looking at the corporate entity and the key people within it. It's a dual focus.
Right, so the message is pretty clear then. They're assessing the whole package. The governance structure, the organization's capability, and the suitability of the actual people in charge. It's a complete picture they're after.
It's a holistic suitability assessment, absolutely.
Okay, let's dig into the actual mechanics of this new system, the registration model. Why did they need a whole new model? Is it just about keeping track of who gets funding?
Funding is part of it, obviously, but it's much more strategic than that. The registration itself performs, well, 3 really vital functions, all focused on protection.
Okay, Rhoda.
First, it's the gatekeeper function, ensuring only suitable providers get in and, just as importantly, stay in the sector. Suitability is paramount.
Makes sense.
Second, it provides transparency. The Commission needs to know exactly who is delivering what services and where they're doing it. Visibility is key.
Right.
And third, all this information generates regulatory intelligence. It helps them spot patterns, identify emerging risks across the market, and hopefully act quickly before things escalate.
So it's about suitability, transparency, and risk intelligence.
Exactly. Those 3 pillars.
And the bottom line for providers is pretty stark, isn't it?
Right.
No registration means no Australian government funding. Simple as that.
That's the ultimate practical consequence. Whether you're offering complex residential care or, fairly straightforward help at home like cleaning or transport if it's government funded, you must be registered.
Okay. Now, this new model introduces 6 distinct registration categories. Why categorize things this way?
It's a core part of the risk-based approach. The categories group services together based on sort of common characteristics, the typical risks involved, and importantly, the specific obligations that apply to providers delivering those services.
Okay, so the category you're in dictates the level of risk and the rules you have to follow.
Pretty much, yeah. It allows the Commission to tailor the regulatory intensity.
Let's walk through these 6 categories then.
Yeah.
It seems like they fall into different tiers based on risk, particularly around that audit requirement you mentioned.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
You can broadly group them into lower risk, that's categories 1 to 3, and then higher risk, categories 4 to 6.
Yeah.
And it's those higher risk ones where the mandatory registration audit kicks in.
Okay, so category 1.
Category 1, home and community services. This covers things like domestic assistance cleaning, laundry home maintenance, minor repairs, delivering meals, providing transport, essential support, but generally lower clinical risk involved.
Right, basic support services. Category 2.
Category 2, assistive technology and home modifications. This is about providing equipment, products, or making adjustments to someone's home to help them live more independently.
Makes sense. And category 3.
Category 3, advisory and support services. This is a bit different. It includes specialized support like hoarding and squalor assistance, or services focused on social connection like social support groups or community engagement activities. Still lower clinical risk overall.
Okay, so if an organization only wants to provide, say, transport, Cat 1, and maybe some social support groups, Cat 3, they still need to be registered.
Oh, absolutely. Still regulated.
But the hurdles to get registered, specifically that big audit, are lower.
That's correct. The intensity, the level of scrutiny really ramps up from Category 4 onwards.
Okay, let's talk Category 4 then. This sounds like a big one for home care.
It is. Category 4, personal and care support in the home or community. This is where you see a significant jump in potential risk because it involves more direct personal interaction.
What sort of services fall in here?
Things like allied health and therapy services delivered in the home, Personal care, help with showering, dressing, mobility nutrition support, general respite care, and this is really crucial, care management and restorative care
And
management.
care management, that's the coordination piece, right? Planning the care.
Exactly. And the Commission makes a really important point here in the source documents. They state very clearly that if you're delivering ongoing home care services or services under specific pathways like the end-of-life pathway, you must meet the requirements for Category 4.
Why? Because of the care management aspect.
Precisely. Because managing risk effectively in someone's home requires that central coordination, that planning function. They're basically saying that any home care involving personal support needs to be governed with a similar level of rigor as, say, residential care. The care management component triggers the higher requirements.
Wow, okay. That's a huge strategic point for any provider doing personal care at home. They're automatically in Category 4 territory, facing the audit and higher standards.
That's the takeaway. It elevates the requirements significantly for many home care providers.
Okay. What about the top tiers, Categories 5 and 6?
Category 5, nursing and transition care. This covers dedicated, often complex clinical services, things like nursing care provided in the home or community, and assistance with specific programs like transition care when someone's moving between hospital and home.
Higher clinical focus there. And finally, Category 6.
Category 6, residential care. This is the highest intensity category. It covers the full spectrum of services provided within a residential aged care home, the accommodation itself, clinical care, everyday living support, non-clinical care, food services, the lot.
Right, the whole package in a facility setting. Now, an interesting point is that regardless of how many categories a provider is registered in, say, they do both Cat 4 home care and Cat 6 residential, they're bound by a single set of provider obligations and conditions. Is that simplifying things?
That's the intention, yes. Compared to some of the older funding models where you might have had slightly different rules depending on the program, this aims to streamline it. So that large provider you mentioned, doing Cat 4 and Cat 6, they have one core set of obligations to meet.
And what are some of those core obligations that apply to pretty much everyone?
Well, the big one is conforming to the aged care quality standards. Those 7 standards we'll discuss later. Then there's having a robust continuous improvement system in place, meeting strict workforce requirements, including adhering to the Aged Care Code of Conduct, implementing the incident management system, the service reporting, having effective systems for managing complaints, feedback, and whistleblower reporting. These are foundational across the board.
And you mentioned category-specific ones, too, like for Category 6.
Yes, for Category 6 residential care, the mandatory financial and prudential standards apply. Given the public funding involved and the fact that people are living there, the Commission places a very high bar on ensuring the organization is financially viable and managing its funds properly.
So viability and accountability are non-negotiable for residential providers.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, alongside these standard obligations, the Commission has a pretty powerful tool, the ability to add Commission-added conditions to a provider's registration.
Right. This sounds like their way of intervening if something's not right without necessarily shutting the whole operation down. How targeted can they be?
Highly targeted.
Right.
And importantly, any condition they add must be proportional to the risk or the non-compliance they've identified. The source material gives a good example.
Yeah.
Imagine a provider registered for Category 4, delivering various home care services. If the Commission finds significant ongoing problems specifically with how they're managing, say, wound care, they could add a condition that specifically stops that provider from delivering only wound care services. They could potentially continue providing other Cat 4 services like personal care or allied health, assuming those are compliant.
Wow. So they can surgically remove a specific service type from the provider's scope. That sounds operationally tricky for the provider.
It would be, absolutely.
Yeah.
Implementing a stop work on just one part of your service delivery would be complex, but it allows the Commission to manage a specific risk without necessarily disrupting all the care the provider delivers, protecting other recipients.
It's a balance between protection and continuity.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that any decision by the Commission to add or change or even refuse to remove a condition is what's called a reviewable decision. There's a process for appeal and review.
Okay, so there's procedural fairness built in.
Generally, yes, though we should touch on an important exception to that later on regarding immediate risk.
Right. Now, beyond adding specific conditions, the Commission also manages risk through ongoing monitoring. they assign a supervision status to each provider.
That's right. Every registered provider gets assigned a supervision status based on the Commission's assessment of their risk profile and how much engagement they need. There are 4 levels, basically dictating how closely the Commission is watching.
4 levels, increasing in intensity.
Exactly. Level 1 is risk surveillance. This is the standard default status. It's typical for new providers who've just passed registration with no major issues or established providers with a good track record and low risk. The Commission is mostly monitoring data reports, notifications, etc.
Okay, baseline monitoring, level 2.
Targeted supervision. This kicks in if the Commission identifies a specific potential risk. Maybe there's an unusual spike in falls reported through SIRS or a cluster of complaints about a particular service. They'll engage more directly to seek assurance that the provider is actively managing that specific risk.
More focused attention, level 3.
Active supervision. Now, the engagement is much more direct, it's sustained, it's formal. This usually happens when there are significant ongoing issues that aren't being resolved quickly enough. The Commission is actively involved, perhaps reviewing action plans, requiring more frequent reporting.
So the provider is clearly on notice at this stage.
Definitely. And level 4 is heightened supervision. This is the regulatory equivalent of the red zone. It's the most intensive level of monitoring and engagement.
When did this apply?
It's typically used when there are serious unmanaged risks, severe or persistent noncompliance, or perhaps when the Commission is considering refusing renewal of registration or even moving towards suspension or revocation. It signals very serious concerns.
So if you find your organization under active or especially heightened supervision, you know you're under intense scrutiny, and formal enforcement action could be the next step.
That's precisely the situation, which leads us to the consequences if things really go wrong.
The sharp end of regulation. Suspension and revocation.
Yes. Suspension is a serious step, often used as a protective measure or if other actions haven't worked. If a provider's registration is suspended, the Australian government funding for their services stops immediately for the duration of the suspension.
Funding stops. Wow, that's huge pressure.
Maximum financial pressure. But here's the kicker. Even though the funding stops, the provider still has to comply with all their obligations during the suspension period. That includes ensuring continuity of care for the people they're supporting.
How would that even work? Running a service with full compliance rules but zero government income? That sounds almost impossible.
It's designed to be an incredibly difficult position.
Yeah.
The ultimate pressure point to force immediate and significant change.
And if that doesn't work or the issues are too severe?
Then the final step is revocation or cancellation of registration. This is reserved for the most serious cases where the provider is fundamentally unsuitable or the noncompliance is so severe or persistent that the Commission loses confidence entirely. Revocation means they can no longer provide any funded aged care services. It's the end of the road in the sector.
The gravity of that really highlights why those initial suitability checks at the registration gate are so important.
Absolutely. It all links back to ensuring only suitable organizations are allowed in the first place. #TagID. Initial registration of new providers. The entry gate.
Okay, let's focus squarely on that entry gate then. The initial registration process for a completely new organization wanting to enter the aged care sector. The Commission seems open to different types of entities applying.
Yes, the policy explicitly mentions a wide range. You can be a company, a cooperative, a government entity, an incorporated association, even an unincorporated body if it has a governing body. Sole traders and partnerships can also apply.
So, quite broad. Why allow such diversity?
The rationale stated is to support choice for older people and also to ensure the sustainability of the sector by allowing different models to operate. They want a diverse market.
Right. Now, the application process itself, you fill out a form, say which of those 6 categories you want to operate in, but it's not the same level of detail required for every category, is it?
No, that's a critical distinction. If you're applying for categories 1, 2, or 3, those lower risk ones we discussed, the information requirements are less intensive.
But for 4, 5, or 6?
For categories 4, 5, or 6, personal care, nursing, residential care, you have to provide substantially more information up front. The application is more demanding, reflecting the higher risks involved.
And there are fees involved, too.
Yes, application fees apply, and they generally need to be paid before the assessment really kicks off. The policy mentions the cost recovery implementation statement, the QRI asks, which outlines the fee structure.
And what about fairness? If the Commission is thinking of knocking back an application?
Procedural fairness is built in. If they're considering refusing registration, they have to notify the applicant, explain why, and give them a reasonable opportunity to respond or provide more information before they make that final decision.
Okay, good to know. Now let's get to the absolute heart of the assessment. The general registration requirements. You need an ABN, obviously, but the real focus is on suitability, isn't it? And these checks seem pretty exhaustive, looking backwards as well as forwards.
They are. This is the primary filter designed to weed out unsuitable applicants before they get anywhere near providing care. The Commission scrutinizes the suitability of the organization itself and any person applying on its behalf. They're looking hard at track records.
What kind of things are they checking?
Several key areas. They look at the organization's experience and performance. Have they delivered aged care or similar services before? And if so, how well do they perform? Past performance is definitely relevant.
Okay.
They check for legal compliance, any history of breaches of Commonwealth, state, or territory laws. And then there's the regulatory history, which is really significant.
How so?
They specifically check for any past banning orders against the organization. And crucially, this includes banning orders from the NDIS sector.
Ah, so they're looking across sectors now.
Explicitly. They also check if the applicant has ever had a previous registration revoked, either in aged care or NDIS, unless, of course, it was a voluntary revocation where the provider chose to exit.
That cross-sector check, particularly with NDIS, feels like a really big deal. Why is that history so important to the Aged Care Commission?
It stems from a recognition, I think, that the underlying issues, things like poor governance, unethical behavior, failures in quality systems, often aren't sector-specific. If an organization fundamentally failed to provide safe, quality services to vulnerable people in the NDIS.
The thinking is they're likely to pose a similar risk in aged care.
Exactly. The Commission sees it as a direct indicator of potential suitability issues. So that door, trying to just switch sectors after a poor compliance history elsewhere, looks like it's being firmly closed.
That's a massive strategic insight for anyone involved in both sectors. Okay, so that's the organization's suitability. But the scrutiny doesn't stop there. It extends to the leadership team, the suitability of responsible persons.
Yes, this is equally rigorous. They are looking very closely at the individuals who will be in charge, the directors, the senior managers. They want to filter out anyone with a history that suggests they might pose a risk.
What flags are they looking for in these individuals?
Again, it's quite a list. They check the person's experience in aged care or similar fields. They look for any past or current banning orders, again, from either aged care or NDIS.
Right.
They check for convictions for any indictable offense that's a serious criminal charge, any history of civil penalty orders being made against them, whether they've ever been found to be insolvent under administration, basically, declared bankrupt.
Bankrupt. That's interesting. Why is personal financial history relevant?
It signals a concern about financial management and potentially poor decision-making. The Commission wants assurance that the people leading the organization have a track record of financial stability and integrity. It's seen as a predictor of good corporate governance and reducing the risk of organizational collapse due to individual mismanagement.
Okay, so it's about governance risk. What else for responsible persons?
Checks for any negative findings related to fraud, misrepresentation, or dishonesty. Whether they've ever been disqualified from managing corporations under the Corporations Act. And of course, they must meet all the relevant worker screening requirements, like police checks.
It's incredibly thorough.
It is. And here's a really important ongoing obligation for providers after they get registered. They have a duty to reassess the suitability of all their responsible persons at least once every year.
Every year.
Yes. And they must notify the Commission if anything changes, if someone becomes bankrupt or gets charged with a serious offense, for example. Suitability isn't just a check at the gate. It's a continuous, ongoing responsibility placed on the provider to monitor their own leadership.
Wow. Okay. Continuous vetting. Now, beyond these general suitability checks, there are also category-specific requirements, particularly for those higher-risk categories.
That's right. If you're applying for categories 4, 5, or 6, you need more than just proof of suitability. You have to submit a detailed plan outlining how you intend to deliver the services for the next 3 years.
What's in this plan? Is it just a mission statement?
Oh, no, much more than that. It needs to demonstrate your commitment, sure, but also your actual capability and capacity. It's a strategic and operational roadmap.
So what does it cover?
It needs to show you have the governance structures in place, the financial resources, the staffing models, the physical resources needed to deliver the proposed services safely and effectively over that 3-year period. It has to articulate how you'll meet the quality standards in practice.
So it links the governance to the actual delivery.
Precisely. It has to be a credible operational plan.
And this brings us back again to that mandatory audit requirement. This is the big hurdle for categories 4, 5, and 6.
It absolutely is. If you want to register in any of these higher risk categories, you must undergo and pass an initial audit against the strengthened quality standards before you can be registered. It's non-negotiable.
And for category 6, residential care, there's an extra layer.
Yes. To be registered in category 6, you don't just need to pass the audit. You also have to simultaneously meet the specific approval requirements for at least one physical residential care home. You can't register for residential care in theory. You need an actual suitable building ready or very near ready to go.
Okay. And we touched on this earlier, but just to reinforce the point about category 4 and home care.
Yes. It's worth repeating because it catches many providers. The documents state clearly, if the services you plan to offer require ongoing care management, think comprehensive home care packages, managing someone on an end-of-life pathway, delivering restorative care programs, then you must also provide the care management service itself.
And providing care management automatically puts you in category 4.
Correct, which means you must meet all the category 4 requirements, including passing that initial quality standards audit. It effectively forces even organizations focused solely on home care to meet a much higher governance and system standard right from the outset if they're involved in managing complex or ongoing care.
That really raises the bar for home care providers significantly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go through the application, the suitability checks, maybe the audit. What are the possible registration outcomes?
Well, the standard outcome, if you pass everything, is registration for a period of 3 years.
Usually 3 years.
Usually. However, if the Commission identified some specific risks during the assessment, maybe minor ones they think need closer watching, they have the discretion to grant registration for a shorter period, say just 1 or 2 years. This allows them to monitor more closely and reassess sooner.
Okay. And if the application is unsuccessful?
If registration is refused, that decision, as we mentioned, is reviewable. The applicant can seek internal review and potentially external review through the Administrative Appeals Tribunal.
And there was one other scenario mentioned, deemed registration. That sounds unusual.
It's described as very rare, an emergency provision only. It can only happen if, say, an existing registered provider suddenly collapses, and there's no other registered provider immediately available to take over, potentially leaving vulnerable people without care, or if there's a critical shortage of services in an area.
So it's a safety net.
Exactly. It allows the system governor a specific role within the broader aged care system to essentially deem an entity as registered to ensure continuity of essential services in a crisis. It's not the standard pathway at all.
Right. Let's dive deeper into this crucial step for categories 4, 5, and 6, the registration audit. This is where the theoretical plans meet the regulator's hard scrutiny. For a new provider, what's the main aim, the purpose and focus of this audit?
For a new provider who hasn't actually delivered any funded services yet, the audit is all about assessing their readiness and their ability to conform with the strengthened quality standards from day one.
So it's forward-looking. Can they meet the standards once they start?
Exactly. The focus is heavily on the underlying structures. Do they have the necessary governance arrangements in place? Are the systems designed properly? Policies, procedures, reporting mechanisms? Do they have the processes planned out for things like workforce management, risk identification, incident response, clinical care if relevant? It's about proving they have the framework ready to go.
It's testing if the operational plan they submitted actually translates into workable systems.
Precisely. Proof of planned operational reality.
And the guide mentions these audits are usually done off-site. Why is that?
For a new provider, most of the initial evidence is going to be documentation. The policies, the plans, the procedures, and interviews with the key people, the leadership team. So a lot can be assessed remotely.
But not always.
No. The guide clearly reserves the right for the audit team to conduct an on-site visit if they feel it's necessary. This is perhaps most likely for a Category 6 residential care applicant, where the auditors would want to physically see the proposed service environment, the building itself, to confirm its suitability as part of that linked home approval process.
Okay, let's break down the audit process itself. The guide outlines 3 clear stages. Stage 1, audit initiation. How does this kick off? Does it sound like it requires a quick response?
It certainly seems so. It typically starts with an email or a phone call from the Commission or their appointed audit body. And the applicant's first major task, often with a fairly tight deadline, is to complete and submit something called the Audit Evidence Collection Tool, or AECT.
The AECT, what is that exactly? Just a form?
It sounds like much more than just a simple form. It's described as a comprehensive tool where the applicant needs to map out their intended systems and processes against each requirement of the relevant quality standards. They need to provide evidence documents, plans to support their claim.
So it's basically requiring them to pre-compile their evidence against the standards.
That's how it reads. It forces the applicant to demonstrate in detail how they plan to meet each standard. It's not just submitting a pile of policies. It's showing how those policies connect and will be implemented.
What kind of evidence would a new provider submit here? They won't have years of operational data.
No, they won't have resident surveys or incident trend data, but they must show evidence that they've actually established the required systems. This means providing the written policies and procedures, sure, but also things like job descriptions for key roles, like the IPC lead or clinical managers, draft training plans, outlines of their risk management framework, their proposed clinical governance structure, maybe even draft agreements or handbooks. It's evidence of planning and readiness.
And failure to get this AECT submitted properly and on time.
The guide is quite clear. It's taken seriously. It could lead to the entire registration application being withdrawn, or the commission might issue a formal notice compelling the applicant to provide the documents. It's an early test of the applicant's organization and commitment.
Okay, so stage 1 involves submitting the AECT and wraps up with a short online audit initiation meeting, about 30 minutes just to set the scene. Then comes the core of it. Stage 2, audit delivery. This is where the evidence is really tested.
This is the deep dive phase where the auditors verify the claims made in the AECT and assess the applicant's genuine understanding and capability. They gather evidence from several sources.
What sources?
They rely heavily on the ACT and all the supporting documents submitted. But crucially, they conduct formal interviews with the proposed leadership structure. These interviews sound quite structured and demanding.
Tell me about these interviews. They sound potentially quite intense.
They seem designed to be. There's typically a dedicated governing body meeting. This might involve 1 to 3 members of the board or governing committee and could run for 90 minutes to 2 hours.
What's the focus there? High-level strategy.
Yes, very much focused on Standard 2, the organization. The auditors want to hear directly from the governors about the strategic priorities, the planned culture of safety and quality, how they intend to ensure accountability and oversee the quality systems. They need to be convinced the board truly understands and owns its governance responsibilities under the new act.
So the board members can't just delegate this. They need to be able to articulate the strategy themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They need to demonstrate that commitment and understanding directly. Then there's usually a separate senior management meeting.
Who's involved in that one?
Typically 2 to 5 senior managers, maybe the CEO, director of nursing, head of home care, quality manager, depending on the services applied for. This meeting also runs for about 90 to 120 minutes.
And the focus shifts here, more operational.
Exactly. This delves into the practical implementation. How will the strategic priorities set by the board actually be translated into day-to-day operations? How will they manage the workforce? How will the risk and incident systems function? How will clinical care be delivered and monitored, if applicable? They need to demonstrate they have the operational NOS and the systems mapped out.
Okay, so interviews are key. What other evidence do they look at?
Documents and records are obviously central, reviewing the policies, plans, procedures submitted. And as mentioned, if there's an on-site component, observations of the physical environment would be another evidence source.
Now, when the auditors are looking at all this evidence, the documents, what they hear in interviews, how do they assess it? Is there a standard they use?
Yes, the guide specifies clear criteria for assessing the evidence. To be considered, evidence must be relevant, current, credible, and valid.
Okay, what does that mean in practice for a new provider?
Well, relevant means the policy or plan directly addresses the specific requirement of the standard being assessed. A generic HR policy might not be relevant evidence for a specific clinical care requirement, for example.
Right.
Current means it reflects the new act and the strengthened standards. Using outdated policies based on the old framework won't cut it. The systems need to be designed for the current regulatory environment.
Makes sense. Credible.
Credible means believable and substantial. A single, poorly written paragraph claiming they have a risk management system probably isn't credible evidence for meeting that entire complex outcome. The evidence needs depth and coherence.
And valid.
Valid means it's corroborated or consistent with other pieces of evidence. For instance, If the CEO talks passionately about a culture of safety in the interview, does the submitted organizational structure, the reporting lines, the draft training plans actually support that claim? Is the story consistent across different sources?
So they triangulate the evidence.
That-
And they consider the provider's context too, like rural versus city.
Yes. The assessment considers the totality of the evidence and takes into account the provider's specific operational context, size, location, service types to ensure the assessment is fair and realistic.
Okay. Stage 2 then finishes with a closing meeting, about 30 minutes again. What happens there?
The audit team presents their preliminary findings and ratings against the standards. They'll highlight areas of conformance and any identified nonconformances, gaps. But, and this is really important, the guide states very firmly, no new evidence can be submitted at the closing meeting.
Right, the evidence gathering phase is definitively over at that point,
Correct. The applicant hears the initial verdict based on what's already been provided and discussed.
which leads directly into stage 3, audit reporting. The applicant gets the preliminary report, and if there are problems, they get a chance to respond.
Yes. They receive the preliminary audit report detailing the findings and ratings. If any nonconformances, minor or major, were identified, the applicant must respond within a specified time frame.
What does that response involve? Just saying, we'll fix it?
No, it needs to be much more substantial. They typically need to provide a detailed description of the steps they have already taken or plan to take to address each nonconformance. This often involves submitting a formal continuous improvement plan outlining specific actions, responsibilities, and timelines for rectification.
So they have to show a concrete plan to fix the gaps.
Absolutely. Their response, including that improvement plan, is then summarized by the audit team and included in the final audit report. And it's this final audit report containing the ultimate conformance ratings and the provider's response that goes to the commission decision makers to inform their final decision on whether to grant registration or not.
Okay, let's talk about those final audit ratings. What are the possible outcomes, and what do they mean for a new applicant?
There are 3 potential ratings for each outcome within a standard, which then roll up to an overall rating for the standard itself. For a new provider aiming for registration, realistically, anything less than full conformance is problematic.
So what is conformance?
Conformance is the goal. It means the auditors are satisfied that the applicant has demonstrated the ability to establish the necessary systems, they understand how to implement and monitor them, they have plans for continuous improvement, and crucially, they have the assessed capacity to actually deliver safe, person-centered, quality care according to the standards once they start operating. It's the green light.
Okay. What if they find some gaps? What's a minor nonconformance?
Minor nonconformance means some gaps or deficiencies were identified, but they're considered limited in scope. Maybe they affect only a small part of a system or a specific process isn't fully developed. Importantly, these gaps are judged as unlikely to present significant risks to the health or safety of older people or workers if the provider were to start operating.
What happens then? Can they still get registered?
Possibly, yes. But it's likely registration would only be granted with specific conditions attached, requiring them to fix those minor issues by a certain date. They'd probably also start their registration period under targeted supervision rather than just risk surveillance.
Okay, so registered, but with strings attached and closer monitoring. What about the worst outcome? Major nonconformance.
Major nonconformance is a serious finding. It means the applicant has fundamentally failed to demonstrate the ability to establish or implement effective systems in one or more critical areas. The identified failures are judged as likely to present significant risks to the safety, health, or well-being of older people or workers if services commenced.
And for a new applicant trying to get in the door, what does a major finding usually mean?
For a new applicant, a major nonconformance finding against any relevant standard in that initial registration audit would almost certainly lead to a refusal of registration. It signals they are simply not ready or suitable to enter the market safely.
Okay, so let's assume our hypothetical new provider navigates the application, passes the suitability checks, and crucially achieves conformance in their registration audit. They get registered. If they applied for Category 6 residential care, there's still another step, right? Approving the actual home.
That's right. Getting registered in Category 6 is necessary, but not sufficient. Section 4 of the policy covers the specific process for approving residential care homes.
What are the main requirements for getting a home approved?
There are 2 core requirements listed. First, the provider organization must be registered in Category 6. Second, the building itself has to meet the definition of a residential care home. This means it needs to be a permanent structure, It must be suitable for providing accommodation and care, feel like a home, and it must comply with all relevant building codes and laws.
And the provider has ongoing responsibilities for the approved home.
Yes, they must ensure the home is kept in a good state of repair and doesn't exceed the maximum number of residents it was approved for. Basic operational requirements.
Now, here's an interesting administrative point. Does the home itself need to be reapproved every time the provider renews their registration? Or if the business changes hands?
No, and that's a key detail for operational continuity. Once a residential care home is approved, that approval generally stays with the physical building. It doesn't need to be reapproved just because the provider operating it is going through their 3-yearly registration renewal.
Okay.
And similarly, if an approved home is sold or transferred to another provider who is also registered in Category 6, the home approval typically transfers with it. It separates the approval of the physical asset from the registration of the operator.
That makes sense. Avoids unnecessary duplication. Okay, let's talk about renewing registration. That initial 3-year period can go by quickly. Is renewal just a paperwork exercise?
Absolutely not. The policy makes it clear that renewal is a comprehensive performance review. It's the Commission's opportunity to reassess the provider's ongoing suitability and performance over the entire registration period.
How does the process start?
The Commission will invite the provider to apply for renewal, typically giving them plenty of notice, sometimes up to 18 months before the current registration expires, especially for larger or more complex providers.
And just like the initial registration, does that audit requirement kick in again for certain categories?
Yes, it does. Providers who are registered in Categories 4, 5, or 6 must undergo another quality standards audit as part of their renewal application.
But the assessment for renewal sounds like it looks at more than just the audit result.
Significantly more, yes.
Yeah.
The initial registration audit focuses mainly on readiness and systems. The renewal assessment is far more holistic. The Commission looks at 1, the renewal application itself, 2, the outcome of that renewal audit against the quality standards, and 3, this is crucial, all the other regulatory intelligence they've gathered about that provider during their current 3-year registration period.
What kind of intelligence?
Everything. Their history of complaints received, any serious incident response scheme, OAS notifications they've submitted and how they manage them, their performance against quality indicators, the outcomes of any risk-based monitoring visits or compliance actions taken during the period, their overall engagement with the Commission.
So their entire track record over the last 3 years is on the table.
Absolutely. Even if the provider technically passes the renewal audit itself, if their broader track record shows sustained high risk, poor handling of incidents, or a pattern of non-compliance, that will absolutely weigh heavily on the Commission's decision whether to renew or perhaps renew only for a shorter period or even refuse renewal.
So performance history is key. Assuming renewal is granted, is it usually for another 3 years?
Yes, 3 years is the standard renewal period unless, as mentioned, the provider's risk profile warrants a shorter period for closer monitoring.
And if renewal is refused?
Refusal of renewal is, like initial refusal, a reviewable decision. But if the decision stands, the provider's registration ends. The Commission's focus then immediately shifts to managing the continuity of care for the people affected.
How do they manage that transition?
They place the provider under heightened supervision, work closely with them and potentially other agencies to ensure that all residents or care recipients are safely transitioned to other providers or have alternative arrangements made with minimal disruption and risk. Protecting the individuals is the priority.
Okay. Now, providers themselves might want to change things during their registration period. Section 7 talks about changes initiated by the provider. What can they ask for?
They can apply for variations to their registration. For example, an existing provider might want to expand into a new service category. Maybe a home care provider, Cat 4, wants to start offering nursing services, Cat 5.
Would that trigger another audit?
If they're applying to add Category 4, 5, or 6, then yes, that would likely trigger a quality standards audit focused on their readiness for that new category.
What else can they request?
They can ask to have a category removed if they're no longer offering those services. They can request to have an approved residential care home removed from their registration if they've sold it or closed it. They can even ask the Commission to change or revoke a condition that the Commission had previously added to their registration, perhaps if they can demonstrate sustained improvement.
And these requests need a formal application?
Yes, via an approved form, and usually with the relevant fee. And importantly, if the Commission refuses a change requested by the provider, say, refuses to add a new category, or refuses to remove a condition, that refusal decision is also reviewable.
Okay. Then there's the other side. Commission-initiated changes covered in Section 6. This is essentially the enforcement toolkit.
That's right. These are actions the Commission takes proactively, usually based on identifying high risk, serious noncompliance, a failure by the provider to fix problems, or ongoing concerns about their suitability.
What kind of actions can they take?
They can vary the registration, maybe add new conditions, change existing ones, remove a category if the provider is failing in it, or reduce the registration period to force an earlier reassessment. They can issue banning orders, as we discussed, which can permanently or temporarily stop a provider or an individual worker or responsible person from delivering specific services or being involved in the sector at all. And then there are the most severe actions, suspension or revocation of the entire registration.
Now, you mentioned earlier an exception to procedural fairness. This sounds really important. Normally, the Commission has to give notice, explain their concerns, let the provider respond before taking action, like varying conditions. Is that always the case?
No. And this is a significant power outlined in the legislation, designed purely for immediate protection. The Commission can bypass the standard procedural fairness steps, the notice and response period, if they determine there is an immediate and severe risk to the safety, health, or well-being of people receiving care.
Immediate and severe risk. That sounds like a very high bar. How would that work in practice?
Imagine a situation where the Commission receives credible information, perhaps from a whistleblower, a serious incident report, or an unannounced visit indicating a truly catastrophic failure. Maybe evidence of widespread abuse or neglect, a complete breakdown in critical clinical care like medication management leading to immediate harm, or a dangerous environmental hazard like a building safety failure.
Something posing imminent danger.
Exactly. In those extreme circumstances, the Commission has the power to act instantly to mitigate that risk. They could immediately vary the registration by adding a condition, for example, ordering the provider to stop admitting new residents, or to bring in external management, or even issue an immediate banning order against the provider or key personnel.
Without giving them a chance to argue first.
Correct. The action is taken first to stop the immediate harm. The justification is that protecting people's safety in that moment outweighs the need for prior consultation. The provider absolutely retains the right to seek review of the decision after it's been made, but the Commission can act first in those critical situations.
That really underscores the importance of providers maintaining robust systems and responding quickly to risks themselves, doesn't it? Because the Commission has the power to step in decisively if they don't.
It absolutely does. It highlights the stakes involved in that continuous monitoring and the supervision levels we talked about.
Finally, on the registration lifecycle, there's the aspect of transparency, the provider register.
Yes, this is crucial for public accountability. The Commission is required to maintain and publish the provider register online.
What information is on it?
Key details about every registered provider: their name, business address, the period their registration is valid for, which registration categories they're approved for, their current status, active or suspended, and critically, any specific conditions that the Commission has placed on their registration.
So consumers and families can look up a provider and see their status and any restrictions.
That's the idea. Transparency. And the register has to be kept up to date. It's updated whenever a decision is made regarding registration, renewal, variation, suspension, revocation, or the approval of a residential care home. It's meant to be a current, accurate public record. #TAG-G. Deep dive into the strengthened aged care quality standards, the core expectations.
Okay, we've covered the how of getting registered and staying registered. Now let's get into the what. What is the actual standard of care and organizational performance that providers are measured against? This brings us to the Strengthened Aged Care Quality Standards, the August 2025 version. These are absolutely fundamental, aren't they?
They are the bedrock. These 7 standards define the expected level of quality and safety. They form the basis for those mandatory audits for categories 4, 5, and 6, both at initial registration and renewal. And they are the benchmark for all ongoing monitoring and compliance activities by the Commission.
And they feel different from the previous standards. More comprehensive.
Definitely. They clearly reflect the recommendations from the Royal Commission and the whole philosophy of the new Aged Care Act. There's a much stronger emphasis on the rights, autonomy, dignity, and individual preferences of the older person. It's demanding a significant cultural shift for many providers, moving beyond just risk management to actively promoting well-being and quality of life.
So, if you're being audited, these 7 standards are what you need to demonstrate conformance with. Let's go through them. Standard 1, the individual. The policy says this one underpins all the others.
It does. It sets the foundation by focusing squarely on the person. The core intent is about upholding dignity, respecting individuality and diversity, supporting choice and control, and crucially, acknowledging the person's right to make choices, including taking calculated risks, the dignity of risk.
And the overall expectation for Standard 1 is, my identity, culture, and diversity are valued and supported, and I have the right to live the life I choose. That's quite a powerful statement.
It is. And the specific outcomes under Standard 1 flesh this out. Outcome 1.1 is about person-centered care. It explicitly requires care to be culturally safe, trauma-aware, and healing-informed.
What does that mean in practice?
It means providers can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach. They need systems to understand and genuinely respond to the specific cultural backgrounds, beliefs, past experiences, including trauma, and individual needs of everyone they care for. This includes specific considerations for diverse groups, people living with dementia, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, people from CELD backgrounds, LGBTQI+ individuals, veterans, and so on. It's about tailoring care respectfully.
Okay. Outcome 1.2 covers dignity, respect, and privacy, including freedom from discrimination and abuse. And 1.3 is about choice, independence, and quality of life. This is where dignity of risk comes in.
Yes, outcome 1.3.6 specifically requires providers to support individuals to exercise dignity of risk. This is a major shift away from overly paternalistic, safety-at-all-costs approaches.
How should providers handle this?
The provider's role isn't to simply forbid someone from doing something they perceive as risky, like wanting to walk to the shops alone, perhaps. Their role is to have a proper discussion, explore the risks and benefits with the individual, document that conversation, explore all possible mitigation strategies, and support the person's choice as much as safely possible. Using substitute decision-makers should be a last resort, only when the person genuinely lacks capacity.
That requires quite skilled communication from staff.
It does. And Standard 1 also covers the practicalities. Outcome 1.4 is about transparency and agreements. This isn't just about care choices. It includes financial transparency, too. Yes, it requires providers to ensure individuals give informed consent about the services they'll receive and, importantly, the fees they'll be charged. Agreements need to be clear, and invoices must be timely, accurate, and easy for the person to understand. Financial clarity is seen as part of respecting autonomy.
Okay, that's Standard 1, the foundation. Let's move to Standard 2, the organization. This one seems squarely aimed at the leadership and the overall systems. The expectation is, the organization is well run, I can contribute to improvements.
Exactly. Standard 2 holds the governing body accountable. Outcome 2.1 is critical. It requires the governing body to actively partner with individuals receiving care and their representatives when setting the organization's strategic priorities and direction. It's about co-design at the highest level.
So the board needs direct input from consumers.
That's the intent. And the standard requires the governing body to lead positive culture, outcome 2.2, one that values safety, quality, and inclusion, not just for the people receiving care, but for the aged care workers as well. Staff well-being is linked to quality care.
And the organization needs robust accountability and quality systems, outcome 2.3.
Yes, this outcome requires the quality system to be dynamic and integrated. It shouldn't just sit on a shelf. It needs to actively use information from various sources, feedback and complaints, clinical data, incident reports from SIRS, quality indicator data, audit results to drive continuous improvement.
Standard 2 also covers risk management, 2.4, and incident management, 2.5, which links directly to the SIRS requirements.
Correct. Robust systems for identifying, assessing, and managing risks are mandatory, and the incident management system must align with the SIRS framework for reporting and investigating serious incidents.
Now, a really significant part of Standard 2 seems to be around the workforce. Outcomes 2.8 and 2.9 cover workforce planning and management. These look quite demanding.
They are. They include the detailed requirements around meeting minimum care minutes in residential care, ensuring sufficient numbers of registered nurses are available, and having processes to ensure staff are competent and qualified.
And there's a specific point about employment models.
Yes. Outcome 2.8.1e introduces a clear requirement for providers to demonstrate a preference for direct employment of aged care workers over using independent contractors or agency staff, wherever possible.
A preference for direct employment. That could be a massive operational challenge for many providers, especially given current workforce shortages.
It's a huge challenge. It signals a policy direction favoring more stable, ongoing employment relationships, presumably believing this leads to better continuity and quality of care. but implementing it requires a major strategic shift in HR and recruitment for many organizations.
And what about mandatory training under Outcome 2.9, workforce competence, training, and development? What do staff have to be competent in?
The list is quite specific and reflects the overall focus of the standards. All workers need competency in person-centered care, delivering culturally safe and trauma-aware care, understanding the specific needs of people living with dementia, knowing and applying the Aged Care Code of Conduct, and having detailed knowledge of the responsibilities under the Serious Incident Response Scheme.
So training needs to be much more targeted now, not just generic WHS.
Definitely. It's about ensuring the workforce has the specific skills and knowledge needed to deliver safe, respectful, rights-based care under the new framework.
Standard 2 also includes emergency and disaster management. Outcome 2.0.
Yes, and it's more than just having a plan filed away. The standard requires the emergency plan to be developed in consultation with individuals and workers, and importantly, it needs to be regularly tested and reviewed. Everyone needs to know their role if a crisis hits.
Okay, that's a very governance-heavy standard. Let's move to Standard 3, the Care and Services General Delivery. This one seems to define how the actual funded services should be delivered day to day.
That's right. Standard 3 applies broadly across all service types and focuses on ensuring the care and services provided are safe, effective, and tailored to the individual's current needs, goals, and preferences.
Outcome 3.1 is on assessment and planning. What's key here?
The focus is on comprehensive, holistic assessment that supports preventative care and reablement where possible. A really specific addition here is the requirement for rigorous processes around advanced care planning. Outcome 3.1.6.
How so?
Providers must have systems to not only discuss and document advanced care plans, like advanced care directives or documented goals of care, but also to ensure these documents are stored securely, are easily accessible when needed, and crucially, are effectively communicated during any transitions of care, like if someone is transferred to hospital. Avoiding loss of this critical information is paramount.
Makes sense. Outcome 3.2 covers the actual delivery of funded aged care services. There's a strong emphasis here on minimizing restrictive practices, isn't there?
Huge emphasis. This is clearly a major regulatory priority flowing from the Royal Commission. Outcome 3.2.7 essentially requires restrictive practices, things like physical restraint, bed rails, locked chairs, or chemical restraint, using medication primarily to control behavior, to be used only as an absolute last resort.
What does last resort mean in practice?
It means the provider must demonstrate they have exhausted all other less restrictive strategies first. They need to understand the underlying cause of any behavior of concern and try alternatives. If a restrictive practice is deemed necessary, it must be in the least restrictive form for the shortest possible time, with appropriate authorization, consent, and rigorous monitoring and documentation. It requires a sophisticated, multidisciplinary approach, not just reaching for restraints.
That demands significant changes in practice for some providers. Standard 3 also includes communicating for safety and quality, Outcome 3.3.
Yes, this mandates clear, timely, and effective communication about an individual's care. It covers communication between aged care workers during handovers, between the provider and external health practitioners like GPs or specialists, and with the individual and their family or supporters. The aim is to ensure critical information like changes in condition, emerging risks, or updates to the care plan is shared reliably to prevent errors or gaps in care.
And planning and coordinating services and supports, Outcome 3.4, ensures things run smoothly, especially when multiple services are involved.
Exactly. Coordination is key, particularly for people receiving multiple types of support, perhaps from different providers or interfacing with the health system.
Okay, next is Standard 4, the environment. This seems to cover both the physical setting and infection control.
That's right. It aims to ensure the environment where care is delivered is safe, supportive, and comfortable. Interestingly, it distinguishes between services delivered in the person's own home versus elsewhere.
How so?
Outcome 4.1a deals with the environment for services delivered at home. Here, the provider's role is more about partnering with the individual to identify and mitigate any environmental risks within their own home. It's a collaborative approach.
Whereas Outcome 4.1b for services delivered elsewhere, like a day center or residential home.
There, the provider has direct responsibility for ensuring the environment is safe, clean, well-maintained, accessible, comfortable, and importantly, designed to promote well-being, independence, interaction, and function. It needs to feel welcoming and supportive.
And then there's the huge focus in Standard 4 on infection prevention and control, IPC, under Outcome 4.2. This looks significantly strengthened.
It is. IPC is now treated as a core organizational system, not just an add-on. Key requirements include appointing an appropriately qualified and trained infection prevention and control IPC lead. This needs to be a dedicated role with clear responsibilities and authority.
So a named person accountable for IPC.
Yes. The organization must also implement standard and transmission-based precautions effectively. And critically, they need a documented risk-based vaccine-preventable diseases, screening, and immunization program for both the people receiving care and the aged care workers.
Immunization programs are now mandated.
A risk-based program, yes. This makes IPC a fundamental part of governance and risk management, requiring ongoing oversight and resources.
Right. Now, Standard 5, clinical care. This must be one of the most substantial standards, especially for providers in categories 4, 5, and 6 delivering more complex care. The expectation is very high. I receive person-centered, evidence-based, safe, effective, and coordinated clinical care services.
It is incredibly detailed and demanding. It starts right at the top with Outcome 5.1, requiring a formal clinical governance framework.
What does that involve?
It means the organization's governing body must establish and maintain a framework that ensures oversight of clinical care quality and safety. This framework has to be integrated with the corporate governance structures. The board needs to be actively monitoring clinical performance, looking at clinical indicators, morbidity and mortality data where relevant, and ensuring systems are in place to support safe, quality clinical practice throughout the organization.
So clinical quality is now explicitly a board-level responsibility.
Absolutely. It can't be delegated away entirely to clinical managers. The governing body retains ultimate accountability for the clinical governance system.
Outcome 5.2 focuses on preventing and controlling infections within the clinical context, including antimicrobial stewardship.
Yes, promoting the appropriate use of antibiotics is a specific requirement here, linking back to the broader IPC requirements in Standard 4, but with a clinical focus.
Then Outcome 5.3 deals with the safe and quality use of medicines. This looks incredibly detailed.
It is. It requires comprehensive systems covering everything from prescribing support, if applicable, supply, storage, administration, documentation, monitoring effects, and safe disposal.
What are some specific requirements?
Systems must minimize interruptions to prescribed medicines, especially during transitions. Documentation of all medicines, particularly as needed PRN medications, must be rigorous. And there are specific requirements for regular medication reviews.
When do these reviews need to happen?
The standard mandates medication reviews occur when a person starts receiving services, at least annually thereafter, whenever they transfer between care settings, like hospital to home, and also whenever there's a significant change in their condition or diagnosis.
And there's a focus on high-risk medicines.
Yes. Outcome 5.3.6 requires specific processes to identify, monitor, and mitigate the risks associated with known high-risk medicines, things like anticoagulants, insulin, opioids, psychotropics. Providers also need to actively work to reduce the inappropriate use of psychotropic medicines, linking back to minimizing chemical restraint.
Okay. Outcome 5.4 demands comprehensive care. What does that entail?
It emphasizes a holistic, multidisciplinary approach. It includes facilitating access to a comprehensive medical assessment with a GP when someone starts receiving services. And a key requirement, 5.4.2, is that providers must assess and identify the individual's level of clinical frailty using a validated tool.
Assessing frailty, why is that mandated?
Understanding someone's level of frailty is crucial for planning safe and appropriate clinical care. A frail person may react differently to medications, be at higher risk of falls, or require different nutritional support. Identifying frailty up front allows care to be tailored more effectively to prevent adverse outcomes.
Right. Now, Outcome 5.5, Safety of Clinical Care Services, looks like a long list of specific clinical risks that providers must have systems to manage. This must be a huge focus during audits.
It is. This outcome details the high-impact, high-prevalence risks common in aged care and requires providers to have specific, evidence-based processes for assessment, prevention, and management of each one. It's essentially a checklist of critical clinical safety areas.
What areas are covered?
The list includes managing risks related to choking and swallowing difficulties, dysphagia, 5.5.2, promoting continence and managing incontinence, maximizing dignity and independence, 5.5.3, preventing and managing falls and mobility issues using specialized assessments and interventions, 5.5.4, preventing and managing malnutrition and unplanned weight loss, 5.5.5, supporting mental health, Recognizing and responding to changes, 5.5.6. This links closely with Standard 5.6 on cognitive impairment, requiring dementia-specific care approaches. Maintaining oral health, including facilitating access to dental services, 5.5.7. There's growing recognition of the link between poor oral health and overall health, nutrition, and well-being. Assessing and managing pain effectively, 5.5.8. And this includes a critical requirement: ensuring pain management strategies are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
147 pain management availability. That's a significant operational requirement, isn't it? Especially for smaller providers or home care.
It is. It implies needing access to appropriate clinical assessment and intervention around the clock to manage acute or escalating pain, rather than waiting for the next business day.
And the last item under 5.5?
Preventing and managing pressure injuries, 5.5.9.
Okay, a comprehensive list of clinical must-dos. And finally, under Standard 5, Outcome 5.7 covers palliative care and end-of-life care.
Yes, this requires providers to deliver high-quality palliative care, either directly or through partnerships, that focuses on comfort, dignity, managing pain, and other symptoms effectively, and supporting the person's emotional, spiritual, and cultural needs. A key aspect is also working to minimize unnecessary transfers to hospital at the end of life, respecting the person's preference to remain in their familiar environment where possible.
Okay, that covers the very detailed Standard 5. Now let's look at the last two standards, which seem primarily focused on the residential care setting. Starting with Standard 6, food and nutrition. The scope note explicitly says this is mainly for residential homes.
That's right. This standard reflects the huge impact that food, nutrition, and the dining experience have on a resident's quality of life. It's not just about clinical nutrition, it's about enjoyment, choice, and social connection. The expectation is high. I receive plenty of food and drinks that I enjoy. Food and drinks are nutritious, appetizing, and safe.
Outcome 6.1 requires partnering with individuals on food choices and monitoring satisfaction, but Outcomes 6.2 and 6.3 get into the professional input needed for menus.
Yes, this is a significant change. While resident input is vital, 6.1, the actual menus need to be developed with input from qualified experts, specifically chefs or cooks, and an accredited practicing dietitian, APD, or other appropriately qualified nutrition professional, 6.3.1.
So dietitian input on menus is now mandatory.
That's how it reads. Furthermore, the assessment of nutritional needs, Outcome 6.2, must systematically consider residents' needs, goals, and preferences, and specifically focus on ensuring sufficient intake of protein and calcium-rich foods, 6.2.2. The Commission is targeting no nutritional deficiencies.
Protein and calcium specifically. And Standard 6 even dictates requirements around the dining experience itself, Outcome 6.4.
It does. It's not just about the food, it's about how it's served. This outcome requires providers to ensure the dining environment is welcoming and promotes social interaction. Critically, it requires sufficient numbers of staff to be available to provide assistance to residents who need help with eating and drinking, ensuring they can dine at their own pace and enjoy the social aspects of mealtimes.
So no more rushed, task-focused mealtimes. It needs to be a supported social experience.
That's the clear intention, a dignified, home-like dining experience.
Okay. And finally, Standard 7. The residential community. Again, the scope note says this applies only to residential care homes. What's the focus here?
This standard is about ensuring the residential setting feels like a true home and community, where residents feel safe, respected, and supported to maintain their identity, relationships, and connections. The expectation: I am supported to do the things I want and to maintain my relationships and connections with my community.
Outcome 7.1 covers daily living. What aspects are highlighted here?
It covers supporting residents to participate in activities they find meaningful, maintaining connections with people important to them, and having control over their personal space. For instance, Outcome 7.1.4 explicitly requires providers to support residents' right to control access to their own room.
Privacy and personal space.
Yes, and Outcome 7.1.6 is also quite significant. It requires providers to enable and support residents to maintain social and personal relationships, including intimate relationships, free from judgment or discrimination.
So the standard explicitly protects the right to intimacy in residential care.
It does. It's a clear statement about respecting residents as whole people with ongoing personal needs and rights, regardless of their age or care setting. It's a necessary marker for cultural change.
And the final outcome, 7.2, deals with transitions.
Yes, this focuses on ensuring smooth and well-coordinated transitions for residents, particularly when moving between the residential home and hospital or other care services. The aim is to maximize continuity of care, ensure information is shared effectively, and minimize the stress and potential risks associated with these transfers. Hashtag H-outro and final thought.
Right. Well, we've covered a huge amount of ground there. We've journeyed right from the initial application process, those really intensive suitability checks looking at past performance, even across sectors like
Yeah, the
NDIS,
gatekeeping function is much stronger.
through the mandatory audit process for higher risk categories, which really tests organizational readiness.
Definitely a significant hurdle for categories 4, 5, and 6.
And then landing on the ongoing, incredibly detailed obligations defined by those 7 strengthened aged care quality standards.
It really paints a picture of a much more integrated and demanding regulatory model, doesn't it? The registration and audit are the entry point, but the ongoing supervision model and the constant measurement against those standards ensure it's a continuous process of demonstrating suitability and performance.
The compliance burden definitely feels immense, but listening to the detail, you can see the underlying purpose behind it all.
You can. Every requirement, from the board-level clinical governance in Standard 5 down to the dietitian input on menus in Standard 6, ultimately traces back to that core mandate we started with, protecting the rights, safety, and well-being of older people receiving care. That's the why.
And a key takeaway for providers, especially those perhaps entering Category 4 home care for the first time or existing ones stepping up, is that the expected level of governance, systems, and clinical oversight is now much higher across the board.
Absolutely. The traditional distinction where maybe residential care was seen as having much higher governance needs than home care has really blurred. If you're managing complex care in the community under Category 4, the expectation around systems, risk management, and even clinical oversight is now significantly elevated. The bar has definitely been raised.
It really has. So, considering everything we've discussed, the breadth and depth of these requirements, what's the final, maybe provocative thought you'd leave our listeners with as they grapple with implementing all this?
Well, looking at the sheer scope of these standards, demanding everything from top-level strategic partnerships with consumers, Standard 2, rigorous clinical risk management, Standard 5, detailed workforce planning, including that preference for direct employment, Standard 2, right down to ensuring a positive dining experience, Standard 6, and supporting intimacy, Standard 7. It really suggests that achieving genuine sustained compliance isn't just about updating a few policies or running a training session. It seems almost impossible without a fundamental, holistic commitment woven through the entire organization.
A complete cultural transformation.
Exactly. From the governing body setting the tone right down to every single interaction by frontline staff, it requires a deep, person-centered culture to truly underpin all those systems and processes. So the provocative question is this. Given the very real pressures on resources, workforce availability, and time in the sector right now, how quickly can that necessary deep cultural reform actually follow the legislative and regulatory mandate?
That gap between the policy requirements and the on-the-ground cultural reality.
That gap is likely where the Commission will focus its attention, and it's arguably the biggest ongoing risk for providers over the next few years as this new system beds down. Closing that gap requires more than just compliance. It requires genuine organizational change.
That's a really powerful point to end on. The challenge isn't just meeting the rules, but truly embedding the philosophy behind them. Understanding the why and the detailed how, from suitability to food service, is absolutely essential. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.